Our first presenter is Alex. He's the president of an umbrella organization in the Netherlands with 40 collectives and 11,000 farmers who participate in agri-environmental government schemes. These are policies that reward farmers if they implement practices that restore landscape and improve biodiversity. So I will let Alex take it away from here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to tell you something about what we do in the Netherlands. I'll try to share my screen with you. I am a dairy farmer in the Netherlands, and the farm we have is about the average size in the Netherlands. We have about 120 milking cows. We have 2 milking robots. We have 70 hectares of grassland, and on 15 of those 70 hectares we do meadow bird protection. The farm is run by me and the companion of mine. So it's the farm is not so big that you need 2 people to run the farm. So I do a lot of things besides being a farmer. One of them is that I'm the president of Farmers Nature, BoerenNatuur in Dutch, but if you translate it to English, it's Farmers Nature. And that is an umbrella organization of 40 cooperatives who organize together with 11,000 farmers the agri-environmental schemes in the Netherlands. And that's what well, at the moment it takes a few days a week, 3 to 4 days a week, to be honest, to do the work for the umbrella organization. So it takes a lot. Most of my time during the week I spent on meetings and giving presentations and talking to the government and talking to farmers and all kind of and NGOs. So I'm more or less a part-time farmer now. What I do in my presentation, a short description of Dutch agriculture, especially about the problems we have run into the last years, and then I make the switch to what do we need to change in agriculture in the Netherlands, maybe in Europe, and what is the collective approach, the agri-environmental schemes, what do they bring to that problems and approach, and how do we organize things, and where do we go from here? So to start with Dutch agriculture, we are famous for the success of Dutch agriculture in terms of that we produce a lot of food. We are second on the list of exporting countries with food, and if you look at the world map and see how small country the Netherlands is, and second in exporting food, you can already imagine that's not all what we produce ourselves here. It's a lot about what we export, it's what we import at first, and then do something with it, and then it's exported again. It also means that the world market is really a pretty small market. If you can see that such a small country as the Netherlands can be the second exporter in the world, so you have to be quite realistic about what that figure says. It does not say so very much. Well, if you look at what we did the last 70 years, is to produce every year we are able to produce more. Unless the fact that the total amount of the total area that we can use in the Netherlands for agriculture is declining every year with 1 or 2%, and still we are producing every year a bit more. But it has also a downside. So agriculture has developed very well. The farms have developed very well. There is a downside to that intensive farming, and that is that we have a big loss of biodiversity. We have a big loss of landscape. We have quite a lot of environmental problems. Maybe you saw something about farmers demonstrating with tractors in our capital city, The Hague, and all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of pressure on farmers to do things differently, and that gives a lot of our license to produce is at stake if you look at it that way. The Netherlands is a quite dense country with a lot of people living here, so literally the space for farming it's becoming very small, even smaller. And if you look at the figure I put on this sheet, there are all the lines are going down, and all the lines are most of the lines are representing birds who depend on agriculture. But there's one red line, and that is the line of the farmers. So the farmers, the decline of the farmers is going as rapidly as the decline of the birds. So maybe we should do something about the birds. Maybe we can save them some farmers too. What we think as an organization, BoerenNatuur, Farmers Nature, is that if you look at the future of agriculture, we think we are at the end of an era, and we are at the beginning of a new era. And the end of the era is that we were, as Dutch farmers, we were just growing more food and producing more milk every year. That has been the policy for 50 or 60 years. And we are now at the beginning of a new era where we have to look at another way of farming. So we have to find a way to restore biodiversity, to find a way to restore the landscapes, and to find a way to preserve that we are not harming the environment. So we have to be very keen on how we farm for the future. And if you look at that, you look on how can we do that, then it means that intensification and scale enlargement and specialization is not the answer to the questions of the future. You have to look at a different way at agriculture. And I always say when I went to school as a farmer, and that's more than 30 years ago, they taught me how to rule out nature on the farm and to become master of the farm and to become the one who rules everything on your farm. It was a little bit fighting against nature. And I think that we have to change our way of farming, and that we have to look at the farm as is a part of nature, and we have to try to make it more nature inclusive, we call it in the Netherlands. So we have to try to find ways to farm with nature instead of farming against nature. And I think there are great opportunities when talk about farming and farming with nature. A lot of people think that we have to go back in the years, you have to go back to the previous century, because at that time in 1960 and 1950, the biodiversity in the Netherlands on the farmland was very good, very high. And so people think, well, we have to go back to that time and that period. And I think that is the wrong imagination. They always say we have to go forward, and innovation and robotization will help us, I think, to be more farming with nature instead of farming against nature. So this is what we are trying to do now in the Netherlands, and maybe you recognize it, and that is in Canada also happening, is I think that with different ways of farming, with new techniques and using robots and using drones, it's much easier to farm with nature than it was in the past. So we can try different things. If you have a robot working on sun energy, solar energy, you can recognize herbs and pick out the herbs, just like my grandfather did when he was on his knees in the field. But this robot can do it working without a break. Then we can find we're a different way of farming. And if you combine that with not large parcels of the one product, but small fields close next to each other, when you can create a very variety in all kinds of crops on your field, you can make a farming system that is not so much depending on the farmer, but more depending and trusting in nature, I think. So that is my view at the future of agriculture. And it's a little bit about this image. If you look at the left image, that is how I was taught at school to be a farmer. You're the farmer and you're on top, and you have to control and rule everything on the farm and see it as a component that is not part of another system. It is your system, it is your farm, and you have to rule the whole farm. I think we have to look at farms. If you look at the future, we have to look at farming and farms in a different way, and that's the right picture. Not the eco model, but the ecological model. And that is that you see your farm as a part of a landscape, that you see your farm as a part of an ecological system, that you see your farm as a part of a society. And that means that you have to look at your farm in a different way. And I think this is the biggest change we have to make in farming. And this is not a change in technique. This is not a change that you do working on the field. It is much more a change in our heads, in the heads of farmers. How do I look at my farm? How do I look at everything around my farm? And I think that kind of change is mostly the hardest change to make. But I think that there's a lot in this picture about what we have to do in farming the coming years. The Netherlands is part of the EU, the European Union, and then in the European Union we have a common agricultural policy. The common agricultural policy was invented 60 years ago to support farmers and to rise production. In the last 20 years, the common agricultural policy has gone in a different way, has got different goals, and it's not more supporting production, but it's much more now supporting farmers' income. Has it been for a few years, and now it's changing more to a system that supporting when farmers take measures for biodiversity and environment and landscape. That's happening in periods of 6 years. So every 6 years we have a new common agricultural policy, and after 6 years it is more moving away from the old cap supporting production to a common agricultural policy supporting farmers' income to now a common agricultural policy who has tasks and goals about climate, about biodiversity and environment. And that's for some farmers hard to get that it's changing so rapidly in their view. So the old cap was rewarding the ownership of land. If you have 70 hectares of grassland, so they get a premium of about 300 euros per hectare for just having the land. And in the new cap, it will be different for farmers. You still get a payment for the land you have, but if you want to reach the 300 euros per hectare again, you have to also you have to do something concrete things for climate or biodiversity or environment of landscape. So you have to do real actions to earn the money in the future. But part of the common agricultural policy are the agricultural environmental schemes. And that is what we organize as farmers and nature, BoerenNatuur. And agricultural environmental schemes are in Europe for about almost 20 years. But first it was, especially in the Netherlands, it was a system that was based on the individual farmer. And we came to the conclusion in 2014-15 that it did not create much biodiversity. It was not restoring the landscape. It did not create more biodiversity. The goals of the agri-environmental schemes were to create more biodiversity, to create a better landscape, and to prevent that we are harming the environment. But if you want to protect meadow birds, you have to create a habitat for meadow birds. If you look at the scale of farms in the Netherlands, our farm is an average farm with about 70 hectares. If you want to create a habitat for meadow birds, you have to create that habitat on an area or at least 1,000 hectares. You cannot create that on 70 hectares on my farm. You need much more room. So you have to have a system that farmers in a region are working together to create that habitat. You cannot do that on the level of a farm. So in 2016, we got a new approach, which meant that farmers who want to join the agri-environmental schemes could only join the scheme if they are part of a collective, of a cooperative. So the farmers had to work together. And this is what we, Farmers and Nature, are organizing now. So we organize the 40 collectives, and we help the 11,000 farmers who take part in it to carry out the measures they are taking. So, and in the Netherlands, we have a long history of farmers working together. We have a lot of cooperatives in agriculture. The most companies who are where farmers deliver their goods to, my Milko's the largest corporation in the Netherlands is the Friesland Campina. The milk corporation is one of the biggest. But also in agriculture, in arable farming, there are large cooperatives who take in the sugar beets or take in the grain and all kind of things. So we are used to work together. So this is why working together also on the environmental schemes is not strange for farmers. So what is specific about the approach in the Netherlands? We do it a little bit different than in other countries in the Netherlands, than in Europe, is that the individual farmer cannot make a deal with the government anymore. He has to make a deal with his colleagues, with the farmers next to him, and the farmers together. The group of farmers can make a deal with the government and support, so that the government can support the agri-environmental schemes. That means we have a front and a back door. We always say that the front door is the contract with the government, and the back door is the contract with the individual farmer. And we have now the 40 agricultural collectives covering the complete country. We can now approach the whole thing on a landscape scale. And that work is working now since 2016. This made the system working since 2016 had a lot of made a lot of changes in its responsibilities. It was in the previous years the province, the local province has the money and the budget for things, and they were making the contracts with the farmers, and now we are doing that ourselves. The farmers are making the cooperatives are making the contract with the farmers. So the province still has the goal and the budget. The government wants a beautiful landscape, or wants more biodiversity with arbor farms or arbor birds or meadow birds. And based on that goal and that budget, the cooperative makes a plan that fits the goal and the budget. So we look at what the government has to offer us. Then we make, together with the farmers in this region, we make a plan. How can we reach the goals, and how can we use the budget to reach the goals? So that means that the cooperative has private contracts with the farmers, and the government is not a part of that contract. And on the other hand, the cooperative is the one who has the contract with the government. So the money paid to the farmer is first paid to the cooperative. So the cooperative has a deal with the government, receives the money from the government if they had done what they promised to do, and then the cooperative pays the farmers for the work they were doing. So that means that the group of farmers, the cooperatives, take a great responsibility for the implementation of all the measures, but also for carrying out and for making good plans. I think it works quite well, because I think if you, as a farmer, you are used to taking responsibility. You want to produce more milk or better sugar beets or better potatoes. So you're used to working on a goal. And now we have reached it, or managed it to make it in such a way that farmers feel responsible also for, if you put it directly, to producing meadow birds or to producing a better landscape. So they feel connected with what they are doing. They feel responsibility for creating a better landscape or creating more meadow birds, and that is different than just feeling responsible for carrying out one measure. You have to feel the commitment for the goals to make it work. And that is what we meant to be with this new system, and what we think we did.
Alex, can I interrupt for just 1 second? I forgot to ask at the beginning, would you like questions throughout your presentation if they come up, or wait till the end?
No, it's okay to ask questions during the presentations, but I cannot see everyone. So you have to help me with if someone raises his hand.
Yes, certainly. So one of the questions has come up in the chat, and it says, what if the schemes are influencing the adoption of practices that aren't truly appropriate, adapted to the region, or not supported by science?
That's one of the things. If we make a plan to reach a goal, then we have to prove that it is science-based. So it's not just that a group of farmers can say, "Oh, we think this is a good way." We have to show the government that the plan is all right, and we have to. There has to be an ecological. We have to make sure that people with the right knowledge, ecologists or people who work with us to make sure the plan is right. So it's not just about that we can do what we like. We should make sure that it can reach the goals. It should be scientifically based well enough to show the government that we are doing the right things. Is that an answer to the question?
I believe so. I don't see any follow-up. Feel free to type it in the chat or raise your hand if you have a question.
Yeah. So this picture is about how we look at the whole of the cooperative. Here is the front door. It's the left the left side with the authorities. That's the government where we have a contract with it. On the back door we have a contract with the farmers. This means that we. But what is fine about this construction is that we, on the front door, the cooperative just says to the government, we promise you that we are carrying out meadow bird protection on 1,000 hectares. That costs you just the number, and that costs you about 1 million euros. And on the back door, we can make contracts with the farmers, but we can make contracts with the farmers for 1,100 hectares. We promised 1,000, but if we make contracts for 1,100 hectares, then if something goes wrong some days, then we have some room so that we can still make sure that we keep up with the promise we made the government and still be friends with the farmers. So if you have a contract with farmers for 1,100 hectares and you promise the government 1,000 hectares, something went wrong on the 100 hectares, we still get all the money we asked from the government because we still did what we told them we should do. So that's how this system, it makes that this system is quite flexible and that we can work with it very well. So what we now do with this system, and that's what I told earlier, I have a bit of a cold, so if I have to cough so now and then. Right. The strongest points of what we do is that we can organize it now on a landscape scale, not on a farm scale, but on a landscape scale. It means that we can take conservation measures at level. And I think the strongest way of the cooperation is that we are really an intermediary between the government and the farmers. And the farmers have great trust in the cooperatives because the cooperatives are run by farmers. The farmers are in the lead, the farmers are in the board. So we have great trust with the farmers, and the farmers do not have that great trust in the government. So that makes our position very strong. What we also can do now is the ecological guidance of the farmers. In the past, it was just one farmer having a contract with the government. There was very little ecological guidance. So we now try to help the farmers and we make sure the farmers talk together to each other about how things go in the field, make sure that everything is going all right, but also they can learn a lot from each other and from us. What we also managed to do is that we have a much better contract with the NGOs. We have a lot of NGOs in the Netherlands who have strong feelings, I would say, about how we are farming, about how farming is in the Netherlands. But by showing us that we take responsibility for the landscape and for biodiversity, we can incorporate them a little better in what we are doing as a farmer, and also make them feel a little bit more responsible also. So helps us with our position in the society. This is just an image about how it works. The left is an individual system, and the right is when you put a cooperative in between. Now, this is the map of the Netherlands with the 40 cooperatives, and you can see they are different in size, but we cover the whole country. What the collective does is developing we develop the management, the landscape management plan, and part of that is the preparation of the collective claim, so the claim for the money. We have to organize the contract management with the participants. We have to inspect the realization of the management activities, so we have to also control our farms. We do that in a friendly way. We just the people working for our cooperative are in the fields a lot, and they advise farmers. But when you are on the farm to advise the farmer, you also can see if they carry out the measures well, and we help them well. So it's I think it's about 90% we do is give advice in advance, and about 10% is that we have to really say to farm, well, you made a mistake. You should do it better the next time, and maybe we cannot pay out the whole every money we talked about. Now the monitoring of the measures is quite well. It is much harder to monitor the results, because that's a lot of work. Because we can monitor all the measurements. We have them all in a map. On the map, we have them in the ICT system, so we know what's happening in the field. We can see that. But the results in counting the birds, in counting the insects, and counting the plants, it's really expensive, and we have and if you ask me, we have too little money to do that in the right way, and that makes it really hard to prove that the measures we take are getting the good results. So it's for the future of the whole agri-environmental scheme. It should be better if we could do more monitoring on the real results and compare that with the measurements. And that's, I think, is one of the things we should do better in the future. And we are very proud of that. We can now really help the farmers with their measurements. Now, these are the types of landscape types we try to create. But what does the umbrella organization BoerenNatuur? We are not just an organization who's carrying out the agri-environmental schemes. We have, as I told you earlier, we have a vision on the future of agriculture, and we think that agriculture, even in the Netherlands, with a very intensive agriculture, we should find a way to make it more nature inclusive, find there more space on our farms for nature, for landscape, and biodiversity. And we think that the environmental scheme is a way to make sure that we can make it happen. So we try to do it in such a way. Since 2016, we are carrying out the agri-environmental schemes, and that means that we have 40 organizations in the whole on the whole country working on this theme. And that means that a lot of parties who want to work together with farmers come to us to ask us how do we work with farmers, and if we can help others in working with farmers or making contracts with farmers, and that is growing every year. So every year the cooperatives are doing more things beside the agri-environmental scheme. There are all kinds of projects with farmers about climate change, in water quality, and even making connection with schools to show people how farming in the Netherlands is done. So with creating the cooperatives, the groups of farmers, we created a new layer in the country which is able to help farmers on different ways and to make sure that farmers keep on moving to the future.
Alex, there's another question here. How does the nature inclusive agriculture vision affect the level of food production? So is there a difference in yield since you guys have implemented these schemes?
Yes, if you look at the Netherlands, I think that if we are making the change to a nature inclusive agriculture, the total yields in the Netherlands will go down. But I think it's maybe 10, maybe if you take large steps, maybe 20%. But I don't think it will be more than that. But and we're talking about a country where the yields are very high, and when we try to use every part in our farm for production in the part. I think if you in a lot of places in the world, you have a completely different agricultural system where there is more nature in agriculture than it is in the Netherlands. We are a very small country where we use every inch to produce something. Now we are going back to producing a little less. But on the other hand, the last years we managed on less hectares to produce more. So if we have, the ability to produce more on less hectares, I think that will still grow. But if you literally make room on your farm for landscape or for meadow birds, that will affect the production. But the development of production per hectare on the other hectares will still grow, I think, in the future. So the total decline of production, I think, is not going to be very high, maybe 10, at most 20%. But the 20% we will only reach because there is a lot of there are a lot of other activities in the Netherlands that take land. If you need land for new houses, for industry, or for the energy change we have to make because of the climate change, that takes land from the government, from the farms. We want to create more real nature in the Netherlands. That also is going to happen on land that we farm on now. So every claim on land in the Netherlands makes that the total land we can use for agriculture will decline. And I think that is in a lot of countries is that different. But in the Netherlands we have so little room that every house that is built outside the village makes that there is a little less land for agriculture.
And there's another question here. What has been the farmer reception? Are they lining up to join or are they reluctant?
Well, at first they were a little reluctant because they had to sign a contract for 6 years and they didn't know how it would work. Two things happened in the last years. At the moment, there are more farmers who want to join the scheme than that there is money. So we have 11,000 participants. That should easily could be 15,000, but there's not enough money to carry out the scheme. So we're waiting for more money. And I think there are two things that make that's going to happen. There is, we as agriculture nuns, there's a lot of pressure on agriculture from society, from the people around us, who say that that it is too intensive. We have too much cows, too much pigs, too much chickens, and we have to find ways to show society that we are not just producing milk and sugar beets, that we also can produce things that they like. We can also produce things that's a beautiful landscape. So the farmers are realizing much every year more that we should show the country that we can do more and that we feel responsible for the landscape we create. We own 60 to 70% of all the land in the Netherlands, of the area. And if you want to take responsibility for that, to show them that we want to create a beautiful landscape and make sure that it is beautiful, that means something to farmers. And this is why farmers are much more eager to join this kind of schemes, because they feel the urge to do something. Sometimes they don't know what to do, but they also have to find ways to do it. We can offer them something that way we can help them by doing things on the farm, and we can make sure that they get paid for it. So that makes that a lot of farmers want to join the scheme now. More.
I think that's it for right now, but feel free to continue and then we'll ask some more.
Yes, good. Very fine. What is really important is that we have to find ways to bring the knowledge to all the farmers. And this is what one of the main things we do in the groups of farmers, in the cooperatives, is knowledge exchange. It's a great word, but what it just means is that we organize small meetings with 10 farmers at the kitchen table at the farmer's house and talk to them about what they can do on their farm and and how they can work together. So, but that's really important to make it close to the farmer. We do not organize meetings with 100 farmers and then tell them what to do, but we go to the farmers in their own region together with the neighbors, sit on one table and then talk to them together with them and listen to them, what they want to do, what they think they can do, and we bring in our our knowledge and what the scheme can bring, and then we try to make a plan for the region. So that makes that everybody feels really responsible for what they've been thinking of for themselves for a grain. We also learn from the nature organizations. This has been in a sort of a fight is a big word, but there's been a lot of disagreement with the NGOs and the farmers in the last decades, I would say. In the last years, we are trying to make the connection with the NGOs because they have a lot of knowledge that can help us. And it's very important for us that they see what we are doing and that they respect what we are doing and that they also tell others that they think that we are doing the right things, that's helping us in a good way. So we are trying to keep the nature organizations and the NGOs very close. We also have an ICT system that is supporting the whole thing. So and that is what we control as BoerenNatuur on the national level, and all the cooperatives make use of it, but it's not really UN at the moment, I think. So what am I doing now? We have 40 collectors. They are all certified for the agri-environmental scheme. So they have a way of working that is controlled and makes that way that we have less controls from the government on our work because we are a certified body. Was saying we have 11,000 participants, but that could be more if there was more money available. The system is working quite well, but we can up to 99, almost 100% of the subsidies that are available is being paid out to the farmers. We have a very good system, and what I told you about the flexibility, we can have a contract with the government for 1,000 hectares, and we have a contract with the farmers for 1,100 hectares. So if there's a failure on 100 hectares, we still get the total subsidy and we still can use all the money. Well, if you look at the cooperative, it needs money for their work. So it's about the overhead costs of the cooperative. We use now a little less than 20% of the total budget for the overhead. And in the past, when the government was organizing itself, the overhead costs were about 40%. So we can do it much cheaper. And I'm proud to say, I think we do it much better than the government did it in the past. So now we can do it ourselves. It's much more also than it was when the government was doing it. And we are promising results. But it's quite hard, as I told you, but monitoring the real results, the amount of birds, the amount of plants, the amount of herbs, and the amount of insects. This is quite expensive, and we should pay much more money in that. Yeah. If you look at the future and the new common agricultural policy, there is a collective approach. In the past 6 years, we were the only country in Europe who did it in this way. It was a kind of an experiment for Europe that we were able to do it this way. But now it has a base in the common agricultural policy, and other countries are doing what we are doing. The Netherlands, Germany, Ireland, and France are now also experimenting with the collective approach, we call it. The collectives are growing in a sort of role as a regional partner for a lot of other projects. So we do much more than just carrying out the agri-environmental schemes. We are part in all kinds of projects. What we see is that a lot of farmers are more motivated if you let them participate in something they have influence on. In the past, there was a list of measures you could do, and you had to sign. You could choose from the list, and that was it. And now we are challenging the farmers together with us to think with us what is the best thing to do, and we also try to invent new measures to do. And that is much more motivating for farmers. When they have feeling that they can influence the whole thing and they can influence what is done in their region, that makes that they are much more motivated than they were in the past. What we are hoping and we're trying to do is that the products that the farmers produce, because the farmers who take much more agri-environmental part in the agri-environmental scheme and they produce food, that they should get a higher price also for the milk or the sugar beets or the potatoes, because they produce something together with nature instead of against it. So that's what we are trying to make sure, but it's a very hard and long way to make the market work on that kind of issues.
A question on that. It says, how are you dealing with the pressure of huge increases in crop prices that may render the schemes a sort of a bad deal for farmers who are locked in?
Yes, this is my last picture, so maybe I will quit sharing. I would say you can stop sharing, but I am sharing, so we can see each other better. Well, what we can pay the farmers is based on the prices that are that been for the last 2 years. So we have a period. We look back 2 years, and the average price of the products in the last 2 years is what we based our payments on. So at the moment we have very high prices, and we are really in discussion with the farmers from it's what we can pay, is that enough if you compare it to barley or to other products. So that is really a discussion now, but the prices, I don't think the prices will stay as high as they are now. So and so this will average out in a few years, but that is really a discussion, because we cannot change what we are paying the farmers every year. So we make a contract for 6 years. The contract is based on the prices they got the last 2 years somewhere on a period of 2 years, and that in that period of 2 years, I think 1 year the prices were really high, and the year before that they were a little bit lower. So the prices we are paying the farmers now are about 20 to, and some measures are 30-40% higher than they were in the last period. So we have to move along and try to keep up with the prices, but that's not completely possible.
So then, I guess just to clarify, the government schemes, what percentage of the farm income is that then, or a ratio?
It's not most of the farmers do it on a small part of their farm. I have 15 hectares of meadow bird protection on the total of 70 hectares. If you look at what kind of the income it is, I think it's about between 10 and 20% if you look at the average farms. And it depends a bit on how your farm is organized and how much you do. I hope it will be more in the future, but mostly it's closer to 10 than to 20, to be honest.
I guess it's not so much a question, but more of a statement. George is saying if he crunched his numbers right, 72 million euros in 2019 on 114,000 hectares works out to 631 euros per hectare. And he says that's a lot of money to protect the environment.
Well, that depends on what you can think it's a lot of money. I think in the Netherlands we spend a lot of money on nature also. What we pay farmers is it works away in a bit that if we ask a farmer to delay his mowing in the spring for the meadow birds, then we try to calculate how much harvest it costs. So if you normally we May in the first week of May, then you have a very good quality. And if you want to preserve meadow birds, you cannot start mowing before 15th of June. Then you have quite a different product with less quality. So then we make a kind of a calculation, because how much does it cost the farmer to delay his mowing? And that is where it is based on. So delayed mowing is not the most expensive thing to do, but we also have a measure that we put a part of the land underwater to make sure if you have a very dry spring that there is enough food for the meadow birds. But if you put a part of your land underwater, then you have no crop next year. So then it's 600 euros is not enough. So for that kind of measure, it is more. It's about 2,000 euros per hectare if you put it underwater. For delayed mowing, it is about 300 euros per hectare. So that's the difference.
So you've used the meadow bird example a few times. Is that obviously it's an example, one of these initiatives. Are they the same throughout the collectives, or each collective has their own initiatives? How does that work?
Well, they have different kind of things. The meadow birds is the largest part of our work, but we also do things for arable birds in arable regions, because it's divided in regions, and that means that in the arable regions you do we work a lot of it with the parcels. We take can't find the right English words. Take small strips around the fields to create a habitat for the arable birds. So it's mostly not the whole parcel used for meshes, but just the strips around it. That's a bit of a different way. And we have large areas where we have hedgerows. So to keep the hedgerows and to maintain the hedgerows and to plant new ones, we also have schemes. And we are now we also have schemes for the water quality. That means that you cannot use fertilizer and chemicals close to ditches where there's water in. All that kind of measures.
Does anyone have any questions, final questions? We have some time still. Feel free to turn on your video, ask your question yourself, or type it in the chat. Any questions? All right, you must have answered everybody's questions that they had. So thank you so much for a fascinating presentation. I really enjoyed it. Farming Smarter wants to recognize some of our program partners, so ICI and RBC, big thanks to them. We are wrapping up this session. Feel free to connect with Alex. He's actually on the Feedloop platform as well, so you can do the private chat. So if you haven't figured that out yet, you can connect with individual people in a private chat. So feel free to do that. And he's available, it sounds like, for a little while. Alex, is that right?
Yes, I am available, and it was nice to be here and nice to give a presentation in this way. And if there are any questions, just don't hesitate to ask, and you have my so it's no problem. I think even we have some documentary things in English, but I have to look it up.
No worries. All right, so we'll wrap this session up.